In this video, we're going to implement the index of our posts. Now, I want to go ahead and write out the first view, the view that lists all of the posts first, because that's going to present some interesting issues that we haven't addressed yet. Namely, it's going to introduce pagination. Pagination is simply code that handles the ability to page between multiple pages of data. So for example, if we had 50 posts and 10 posts per page, we should have 5 pages. However, to actually show this in the proper way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the database directly and just throw in some posts. Sound good?
Yeah, that works for me.
Awesome. So I'm just going to open this up. I'm going to give the user ID. What's my user ID again? Is that 6?
I think
6.
so, yeah.
User ID is 6. Remember, I can't add a user ID that's invalid because of the foreign key constraint. Say this is a post, this is a post, and then created at will just be, what's now? 10, what is it, 15?
10, 11.
2013. And then updated at and deleted at will be null. Make sure it likes that date format, and it does. Okay, so let's go ahead and, oh, it didn't. I don't really care. It doesn't really bother me too much that our dates are wrong. I just want to put enough rows in here so that we can look at pagination first. The reason I want to look at that first is because it'll prevent us from having to backtrack once we get the create form built. Sound good?
Yeah, that's working for me.
See, I don't know why I didn't just copy and paste the SQL statement and then re-execute it multiple times. I don't know why I'm like forcing myself to use a GUI tool to do this, but you know.
You like to punish yourself.
Apparently I do. All right, we now have 14 posts. Let's add 2 more. How about 3 more? So that we can do 5 posts per page, and we'll have a couple pages to sift through. Okay?
All right.
Alrighty, so now we have data in our posts. It looks like we never actually created the content field, did we?
No, I have no memory of a content field.
Well, guess what? This actually shows us a really cool thing. We don't actually have post content yet, unfortunately, because we didn't add it into our migration. But what happens if we make a mistake like that and we've already deployed our migration to production? Remember, once you deploy your migration to production, you should never, ever, ever edit it.
All right.
So how do we fix this? How do we retroactively fix a broken database schema? Well, we do that by creating another migration. So we're going to create 003, add content to posts. Okay?
All right.
We're going to create a migration. It's going to be number 3. It's going to inherit from migration. And then we're going to say create column content on table posts as custom text. Sound good?
Sounding good so far?
So we're creating a new column on table post as custom text, and the down will delete column content from table posts.
All right.
Hit F6, jump into my tools folder, double click on this. It ran. I don't know if you guys saw it in the video, but it did run. Jump back in here, redo a select, and now we have a content field.
Nice fix.
Yep. So yeah, just remember, never edit a migration once it's deployed to production, but you can always write a new migration to fix your mistake. So getting back to the problem at hand, we need a way to very cleanly do pagination, where what we'll have is we'll have a view model with a special data type that we will be able to generate forward and back links for. We don't actually want to return a list of posts into the view model that we're going to create for post index. Instead, we're going to wrap it in another data type that we'll create. That data type is going to be called paged data. Let's go ahead and implement paged data. I'm going to go into infrastructure and I'm going to create a new class called paged data. Paged data will be a generic type and it'll implement IEnumerable of that generic type. meaning page data will be virtually indistinguishable from a normal IEnumerable of whatever type, which means all of our awesome link methods will still work on it. Now, page data will have a couple properties. It'll have public int total count. That's going to be the total amount of entities in the database. Then it's going to have public int page. Page is going to be the current page we're on. Then it's going to have public int per page, which is going to be how many pages are left. Then it's going to have public int total pages. Now, total pages is going to be a computed field where it will use page and per page to calculate something. But we'll do that calculation in the constructor instead of the property. So I'm simply going to set it to get private set. Next up, we need a public bool has next page, which will be a computed property, but we'll do that in the constructor. Then we need has previous page, which we'll calculate in the constructor. Then we'll have public int next page. Next page will be a property that if it does not have a next page, we'll throw a new invalid operation exception. Just throw an error saying they're doing something wrong. Otherwise, it'll return current page plus 1. Then we're going to create a public int previous page, which will work in the same way. If I can format this code properly, it'll work in the same way. Actually, no, formatting, it's not like it really matters as far as the compiler is concerned, but it matters to me.
And that's important.
It is. Previous page will be the same thing. If it doesn't have a previous page, it'll throw a new invalid operation exception. And then it'll return page minus 1 if it does have a previous page. That's almost all I need to make this code work, except for I need a constructor that will accept the parameters that will allow it to compute all of these operations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a constructor. The constructor is going to take in an IEnumerable of T called current items, an int total count, an int page, and an int per page. Now, it's going to set current items to a private field. So I had that generated for me, but all it really did was it created a private read-only IEnumerable of T at the top of the file called underscore current items. Now that's just set to whatever we pass into the constructor. Next up, we need to set our total count, our page, and our per page. Now that we've done that, we can now calculate our total pages, has next page, and has previous page. It's actually pretty simple to do. Total pages is going to look like this. It's going to be cast to int, math.ceiling, cast to float, total count divided by per page. Now the reason we're doing the casting is to make sure that all the operations perform correctly without losing precision until the final operation. So total count divided by per page should result in a decimal. We'll get the ceiling result of that, and ceiling just always rounds up, no matter what the value is, it'll always round up. And then we cast it into an int to truncate the decimal place, which doesn't exist after ceiling, but for some reason ceiling doesn't return an integer. Ceiling returns whatever we passed into it, either a decimal or a double.
Alrighty.
Then we need to calculate if we have a next page. So has next page will be equal to page is smaller than total pages. So if our current page is smaller than total pages, we have another page. Next up, we'll calculate has previous page. Has previous page simply says if the page we're currently on is greater than 1. Sound good?
Yeah, I mean, that's basic logic.
Right. Okay, so our page data is nice because it provides us with a lot of really nice convenience methods for doing calculations that are typically strewn around an entire web project. And it puts all these calculations in one spot. But we're missing one thing. We still need to get the data that we instantiated the page data with out. For example, we'll still need to get the posts that we put into this class out of it. Well, notice how we implemented IEnumerable of T, and we're now getting an error because we don't actually implement the members that IEnumerable of T requires. To do that, I simply say implement members and finish. Now, IEnumerable of T comes with two members we have to implement. Both are named getEnumerator. However, one returns a non-generic enumerator, and one returns a generic enumerator. The non-generic enumerator one can simply return the result of invoking the generic enumerator one. And the generic enumerator one can simply execute current items.getEnumerator. Because we're essentially just delegating the enumerator into the current items collection that was passed into the page data.
Alrighty.
Okay, so this really doesn't do anything yet, except for do some calculations so we don't have to repeat ourselves everywhere. So let's go ahead and see how we can use this. In our post controller, in our admin, we have an index page, index action. That index action should return a result of current posts, right?
Correct.
And it should also return information about the pagination. So because it's going to return data into the view, we need to create a view model. So I'm going to go into our view models namespace underneath our area's admin, and I'm going to create a new class called posts. However, I really just did that to create a new file, because I'm going to rename the class from posts to posts index. Remember, the view models convention that I use is controller followed by action. The only data that's going to be in the posts index is a public paged data of post called posts.
All right, looking good.
Now note that simple blog infrastructure and simple blog models has been imported. Now going into our post controller, how do we construct a page data of posts? We need two bits of information. We need an account of how many posts there are in the database, and we need the posts that we're on the current page for. Well, how do we get that? The first thing we need is we need a get parameter to determine what page we're on, and we want it to default to 1 if no parameter was specified. We do that in the parameters of the action. We can simply say int question mark page equals 1. And when I say int question mark, I just meant int page equals 1. Sorry about that.
All right.
So that will simply say this action accepts a parameter called page, and if it's not supplied, it'll default to 1, which is kind of what we want. Okay, so next up, we want to get how many total posts there are in the database. That's pretty easy to do. We simply say var total post count equals database.session.query import nHibernate link post import simple blog models dot count import system link. This variable now contains the amount of posts in our database.
All right, very nice.
Now we have to get the current page. So how do we do that? Well, we need to know how many items there are per page. I'm going to store that in a little constant at the top of the class. I'm going to say private const int posts per page equals 5. We'll do that 5 for now so we can test our pagination. So how do we get a slice of data out of our database? So I'm going to say current posts page equals database session query post. That's not the only thing I have to do. We're going to start a nice little method chain to do what we want it to do. We're going to say dot order by descending creation date, or created at. That's the first thing we want to do is we want to order. Then we want to skip page minus 1 times per page, and then we want to take posts per page, and then we want to flatten it into a list.
Okie dokie.
So what we're doing is we're grabbing all the posts out of the database, we're ordering them by their created date in ascending order, we're skipping page minus 1 times post per page. So if page is 1, we skip 0 items. If page is 2, we skip 5 items. If page is 3, we skip 10 items.
Gotcha.
Then we take posts per page. So we take, for example, here 5. So this will give us a slice of the pages based off what page we're currently on.
Gotcha.
With these two bits of information, we can now construct a page data. So I'm going to invoke view with a new posts index, which will bring in a reference to our view models namespace. And posts will be a new instantiation of page data. The current items will be current post page. The total count will be total post count. And the post per page, or the page will be page, and the post per page will be post per page.
All right.
So by doing that, we now have access to all those calculations that we made in page data, as well as we have a list of pages or posts that we can loop over, which is super fun.
Indeed it is.
Alrighty, so let's go ahead and write up our actual index. So I'm going to go into posts, index. Now the first thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to make this a strongly typed view so I can take advantage of the data that's being sent in from the controller. To do that, I simply do model, simple blog, areas, admin, view models, posts, index. So now it's a strongly typed view. Okay, let's do some fun stuff, I suppose.
Well, if you must.
Yeah. Well, we're just getting into some HTML we're going to have to write to make things pretty.
We like Purdy, so let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to create a button toolbar. Again, that's a Bootstrap thing. Then I'm going to create, inside of it, I'm going to create a button group. This button group will have a single href URL action new create post. Now, it's going to have an icon, so we're going to say I. Now remember, we need our glyph icons and our glyph icon plus. Then we're going to give this button the class of btn, btn primary, and btn small, or what small, sm.
Alrighty.
So that's our create post button. Now we need to do our pagination. Our pagination will be a button group with the poll right class on it. That'll make it appear on the right-hand side of the screen. Then I'm going to say if model.posts.hasPreviousPage, then do ahref equals url.action new page equals model posts previous page. Then I'm going to give it the class of btn primary. Whoops, I don't want to print. btn small. Then I'm going to give it a icon with the class of glyph icon and glyph icon chevron left. Then I'm going to say prv or previous page. Look good?
That looks beautiful.
Now we're having a tiny little issue here because we are expecting an action name with our route values. That's actually not too terribly difficult to fix. I can just go ahead and say index with new page. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a link that's going to have the page in the query string, and the page is going to be the previous page. Now, if we don't have a previous page, I want to display a disabled button. So it's going to be ahref pound class btn default btn disabled and btn small. Then we're going to have we're basically going to have the exact same content that we have here.
Alrighty.
Then I'm going to do the same thing for the next page. I'm going to say if model posts has next page. Say ahref equals url.action index new page equals model posts next page. Its classes are going to be btn primary, btn small. Then it's going to have an icon. The icon is going to have a class of glyph icon, and then glyph icon chevron. Guess what it is? Right.
There we go. I couldn't click on fast enough.
And then if it's disabled, we'll have ahref pound class btn default, btn disabled, btn small with the exact same content. Yes, I could create a helper here or something like that, but I want to make this code very, very explicit for everybody who is watching.
Excellent. What about all the red?
Well, the red right here is just saying that we haven't created a new action yet.
Okay.
This red is actually just it's just telling us that we can navigate to something.
Okay.
It's a resharper feature.
Excellent.
Okay, so we'll hit Control or F6, come back here and hit refresh. We still won't see any posts, but we'll see an unable to convert MySQL datetime value into system.datetime. That's because I totally forgot. These guys, as completely blanked out datetime in MySQL, is actually impossible to map to a .NET datetime. But this is really easy to fix. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say update simple blog posts set created at equals now. Sound good?
Works for me.
That way, we have just updated all of our posts to have a timestamp when they're created for now, which is nice. And then, because those are now date times that can be actually turned into .NET types, we'll be able to work.
Excellent.
Okay, so we see our pagination is a little bit broken. Before we go ahead and fix that, for debugging purposes, I'm simply going to create a UL for each var item in model.posts li item.name, or sorry, title. This is here for debugging purposes to make sure that I'm getting something back from the database, which I do. Because
there we go.
You what?
So there we go.
Right. So we do get something back from the database, but you notice that our next page and previous page buttons are not enabled. They're disabled, which is obviously not what we want. We also don't want the chevron right to be on that side of the next page text.
Yeah, we need to fix that.
Yeah, well, that's an easy thing to do. We can just switch the order of that. Okay, so let's figure out why the page data doesn't think we have a next page. So he says model post has previous page, model post has next page. So it doesn't think that we have a previous or a next page. It should at least think we have a next page. So to look at this, we can go ahead into our page data and we can see how has next page is being calculated. And it's saying if page is smaller than total pages. Now, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that does make sense.
Yeah.
So the bug actually happens to be that instead of setting total pages to the calculation of total pages, I set total count to the calculation of total pages. Whoops.
Whoops. So that should say pages.
Yep, total pages equals and then the calculation. I'm going to hit F6, come back here, hit refresh, and our next button should be, there it is.
All right.
So watch how I can go all the way next, and I can page through all of my data. Look up here how the page parameter changes on every page.
Excellent.
Okay, now that we've done that, I'm going to go back into our index.cshtml file, and I'm just going to finish it off. Because all we need to do now is display a form for all of our posts. Or not a form, but a table. So I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to write a table. And I'm going to say class is table, table striped. We're going to have a t-head. The t-head is going to have a single row in it, and it's going to have title, author, tags, date, and actions. Sound good?
Working for me.
Then I'm going to loop over every single post on this page by doing for each var post in model.posts, and I'm going to create a new row. Now the first thing I want to print out is the title, so post.title. Next, the author, which is going to be post.user.username, which remember, the user comes out of a completely different table. So it's really cool to see how IEnumerable is allowing us to write code that accesses our database as if it were written in C#. Then again, this does introduce an interesting problem that we will get to later.
Yeah, I'm terrified again.
Okay, next up we have our tags. Our tags is simply going to be string.join, comma, on post tags select name. Then we have our date. Our date is simply going to be post.createdAt. We're going to leave it at that. Then we have our actions. Now our actions are going to be kind of fun because we're going to have our edit action, but we're going to have two delete actions, and we're going to have another button in the case that we want to restore a deleted post. So
right.
The markup for this is going to look a little terrifying.
I suspected.
First thing, let's do our URL action edit. It's just going to be URL action edit with new post.id. Same thing we did with users. Now it's going to have a class of button button extra small and button primary. Then inside of it, it's going to have a glyph icon of edit, and it's going to have the name edit. Next up, we're going to say if the post is not deleted, so if not post is deleted, then we want to have a split button. A split button is a button that has a drop-down button next to it. So we can click on the actual button, or we can click on the drop-down to get a nice little drop-down.
Sweet.
So fortunately, Bootstrap has that all built in for us. We just have to know the markup. And this is well explained in the docs, by the way. We're going to create a button group with a button group extra small. Then we're going to create an ahref. At this time, we're just going to put a pound symbol in there. We'll implement deleting, restoring, and trashing in a later video.
All right.
The class is going to be button, button danger, and that's it. Then, inside of it, we're going to have an icon. The icon is going to be class glyph icon, and then glyph icon, something that, well, makes it sound like we're trying to delete something. So a remove would be a good idea for that.
Sure.
And then we'll have the word trash. Okay, so good so far?
Good so far. I've learned to virtually trust everything you tell me.
Okay, that's good. Everyone should do that. Next, we need the button that will be the drop-down button. So I'm going to say ahref blank class button, button danger, drop down toggle. Inside of it, I'm going to create a span with the class of carrot. We'll see how that looks here in a moment. Then I'm going to create a UL with the class of drop down menu, inside of which I'll have a single li that has a single a tag with the empty URL, and it's going to simply have a button that represents us deleting the post permanently. So it's going to have iClass glyph icons, glyph icon remove, so the same icon, but it's going to have the word delete.
Alrighty.
Finally, if the post is deleted, we want to show a restore button. Sound good?
That sounds very good. I hadn't thought of that.
So we'll go ahead and say ahref empty. And now remember, we're keeping all the hrefs empty because we're not implementing our trash or delete yet. And then we're going to say it's going to have a class, a button, button extra small, button success. Then it's going to have an icon inside of it. So glyph icon, and then let's do glyph icon plus sign. And then let's call this restore.
Sweet.
The last thing I want to do is if a post is deleted, I want to change the class of the row to mark it as being deleted. Now, fortunately, Bootstrap comes in with a lot of built-in classes for tables, so we can take advantage of that. To do that, I'm going to say var cls equals empty. Then I'm going to say if post.isDeleted, cls equals danger. Then I'm going to say tr class cls. So I'm figuring out the class I want based on whether or not the post is deleted.
Excellent.
Now if I hit F6, which I shouldn't have to do because I don't think I edited a C#, and hit refresh, look what we have here.
Look at all that.
Not only that, look at our trash button. But dropdown isn't quite working the way I'd expect it to, as in it's not actually working at all. The reason it's not working at all is we actually have to tell Bootstrap about it. We can't just do it with classes. We also have to give our caret a data toggle. So we simply say data-toggle equals dropdown. By doing that, we can come back to our page and we can now see the delete button.
That is awesome.
And we can paginate. And, well, clicking edit goes to a 404. Creating a post goes to a 404, of course, because we haven't implemented those yet. All right, so how you feeling, Steve?
My mind is blown completely.
I'm sorry.
No, it's probably a good thing. It needs to happen once in a while.
All right. Okay, so I think this pretty much wraps up the video. I'm going to go ahead and commit now. So jump into source tree. stage all of my files, and then hit commit, and say that we implemented the index action on post admin.
Very nice.
All right, guys, we'll see you in the next video.
Excellent.